When Nigel Farage told the European Parliament that the UK would leave the European Union, they all laughed at him. Well, look who's laughing now. And look who's in our studio. This is Verdict with Ted Cruz. Welcome back to Verdict with Ted Cruz. I'm Michael Knowles. We are joined by a now unemployed member of the European Parliament, Nigel Farage. Thank you for being here. And Senator Cruz, I have to thank you for not only being a number one podcaster in America, but also apparently a very good booking producer because you brought your friend Nigel along.
Well, and this was pure happenstance. So Nigel came and joined the Republican conference for lunch. And he was talking to us about Brexit. He was talking about his incredible leadership in bringing that about. It was absolutely fascinating. And so I walked up to him afterwards and said, well look, we're doing this podcast. Can you come join us? And boom, here he is.
I am so glad that you were able to come because this is going to sound like a very stupid question. But I thought in 2016, the UK votes for Brexit, they're going to leave the EU. Then, for some reason, it doesn't happen. 2017, 2018, 2019. Now we're in 2020. It finally happens. What is the Brexit? And even, what is the European Union?
Well, it's a great question. And thanks, guys. It's great to be here. I spent most of my business life before politics working for American companies. So I know a lot of Americans, a lot of smart, well-off Americans, and they've never quite got what the European Union was. They kind of thought it was a bit like NAFTA, but it isn't. The European Union is a political union, and a member state that joins it gives up its sovereignty, gives up the authority of its Supreme Court to another court somewhere else, accepts the fact that most of its laws, rules, and regulations are made somewhere else, and that the electors in a general election cannot vote to change any of that legislation. We became a satellite of this new entity called the EU. And of course, they've got their own flag, they've got their own anthem. And guess what? The people who run it, the commissioners, are not voted for by the people and can't be removed by the people. Now, this happened slowly. It evolved over time. It was sold to us as being, this is simple. It's trade. It's good for business.
Just an economic unit.
Don't worry your little heads about it. It'll all be fine. And 30 years ago, I looked at this and thought, what the hell? I mean, what did we fight 2 world wars for if it wasn't for us to be free, independent, sovereign people? And that was where my crusade started. So it was a political union. And Brexit, I'll tell you what Brexit is in one word: independence. Simple as that. Simple as that.
There's a kind of parallel over here, I think, because it's not just that there's this fight for sovereignty, this fight for having your own nation that's going on in the UK. It's happening throughout Europe, and it's happening here in the United States.
Well, it's the same battle, isn't it? It's actually really interesting because, the other side call us nationalists. We're all very narrow-minded.
It's a very bad word.
And we hate everybody around the world. And the truth of it is that actually what's going on here is there is a movement of those of us who believe that the nation state, run democratically, is the right model by which we should live, and that within that framework, we trade with each other, we cooperate with each other, we share defense, intelligence, and do many other things with each other. And I find it fascinating that it's almost like a family of us coming together who are fighting back against, and it is called globalism, and they want to do away with the nation state. They want us to be ashamed of our countries rather than proud of them. And they want a massive transfer of power from democracy to bureaucracy. And the great thing is, and it started in 2016, and let me just say this, we nearly always copy everything you guys do. Right?
Oh, thank you. I'm flattered.
Anything America does, we follow. Good things and bad things. But, trends, fashions, whatever it is, we always follow you guys. This time, you followed us. Brexit came first. The Trump revolution came afterwards. And the reason we're sitting here talking about this, and 3.5 years went by, is because the establishment refused to accept the result of the referendum.
Right.
And we have had the most titanic political battle in our country since the 17th century to make sure the will of the people actually got obeyed. And you know what? On the 31st of January, at 11 p.m.
Finally
I was
happens.
there in Parliament Square. There were 100,000 people there. And, you guys think the English are very reserved. They weren't at 11 o'clock on that night. And people were cheering and going mad. And we've got
You're
our
saying
independence.
perhaps a pint or two was flowing.
Well, I think I was certainly downwind of a couple. But this is a major historic moment.
Yes.
I don't think it's just an historic moment for the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Listen, this is the beginning of the end of the European Union.
You think this will lead to other countries leaving?
Absolutely. And with the end of the European Union, we get the end of the globalist project. Now, that doesn't mean they won't always keep on fighting. They will, because you will always get, through history, mankind, those that want to dominate everybody else. But this is a big moment in our history.
So let's stop for a minute and let's go back to how this came to pass. When did the UK join the EU? And how did Brexit start? When did you arrive in the European Parliament? And take us back to the beginning of the Brexit movement, not today, but where it got started.
Okay. In 1870, the Germans...
By the way, I love when I say take us back. We go to 1870.
That's almost modern.
Yeah.
Remember.
We're talking about a pretty old country over
We've been
here.
around a long
It's not like
time.
America,
1870.
Look, in the United States, when we say take us back, it's to 7:30 a.m. So that,
1870, the Germans invade across the Rhine. 1914, the Germans invade across the Rhine. 1940, the Germans invade across
Seeing a
the
pattern
Rhine.
here. Hold on.
Now, there is a very bad joke I'm going to tell you. I asked a restaurateur in Strasbourg once, I said, "Do you get many Germans there?" Oh, he said, they pop by once every 25 years or so. But here's the point.
hard to park the tanks.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the point. This endless battle over territory between France and Germany led to 2 world wars, led to hundreds of millions of deaths. And the thinking post-war was we need to get the French and Germans together round the table to break bread. And the truth of it is, the more business, the more trade we do with each other, the less likely we are to hate each other and fight each other. So the original concept that we have a Europe that comes together was absolutely right. Unfortunately, those innocent beginnings turned into the attempt to build a new state.
Right. To build, and they wanted their own military, didn't they?
And they now want their own army, they want their own air force, and all the rest of it. And so what they've done is, the ancient nations of Europe are now being consumed, having their identities taken away, their democracies taken away. And Mrs. Thatcher, who initially had gone along with the European project, believing that it was about trade.
She was your version of Ronald Reagan. Same time, same...
Absolutely. And, listen, when Margaret took over the United Kingdom, we were a socialist country.
Yeah.
We had top-rate income tax of 83%. It's almost hard to believe the state we got into.
Well, and as she explained then, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is a message, by the way, Bernie Sanders and some American politicians could do to learn.
Oh, I love Bernie Sanders. I love
it.
I love
it.
Bernie Sanders.
Why do you love
I
Bernie?
want to give some money to his campaign. No, listen, if Bernie is the nominee, then you guys are just going to walk it in November.
57 states. We're going to win.
I hope
Greenland.
so.
Yeah.
But I will say, God help us if he wins in November.
Yeah, but the truth is, and we're seeing this across the whole of the Western world, that the left parties are going further left.
Yep.
Right.
They delight their own echo chamber.
Right.
But actually, the middle of our countries looks at this stuff and says, do you know what? We're not having this. So I think Bernie would be very, very...
Well, this brings up an interesting point. I want to get to something where I think you agree on most of it, but I think you disagree a little bit on some of the particulars. And that is moving past Brexit to the Huawei controversy.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just finish off.
Okay.
In 1988, Margaret Thatcher sussed what the European project was. She sussed it.
Yeah.
All right? Because the European community was about to change its name to the European Union. And Margaret sussed it. She blew the whistle, and they got rid of her because of it. They got rid of her because of it. Because all the big business, all the big banks, and all the big money wanted it to go in that direction. And ever since she was gone, the Conservative Party in Britain ceased to be conservative. Ceased to be conservative.
And literally gave away your sovereignty. It's a word you used earlier that I think goes really to the heart of what this is about, which is who's in charge. And the most fundamental notion, the American Constitution begins with the words, we the people.
Yep.
Because sovereignty belongs to the people. And look, as I look at the EU, the sense I make of Brexit is the British people should decide the laws for Britain, and not the damn French, and not the Germans, and not anybody else. And that's basic sovereignty. That's who's in charge.
Not some anonymous bureaucrat. And of course, what we haven't even mentioned is we lost control of our borders as well. So in the early 90s, I helped to start a rebellion.
Yeah.
And the rebellion was against the entire British establishment. It was against the Labour Party. It was against big business. Yeah. But it was against the Conservative Party.
And how far out was it at the time? Like when you started it, how much of with all due respect, of a loon did they think you were?
Oh, people used to say, I don't know what you're smoking, Nigel, but I'd like some of it.
Because it's been a long battle,
we were
decades
considered
long.
Crazy. I campaigned all through the 1990s. And I think at many times during that period, beginning to look a bit like the patron saint of lost causes. But I first got elected to the EU chamber in 1999. So nearly 21 years I was there until January the 31st. And we just slowly but surely developed momentum. And in the end, in 2014, in the European elections, I led UKIP. We won the election.
UKIP's the UK Independence Party.
Right. It was the first time since 1906 that a party had won a national election that wasn't Labour or Conservative. It was a shockwave. And David Cameron was the Prime Minister. And he could see that I was destroying his Conservative Party. I mean, in the country.
Because he wasn't that conservative.
On anything.
You're right.
So in the end, in an effort to save himself and to save the Conservative Party, he said, we'll give you a referendum. That's how it came to be. As I say, we had the referendum. We won the referendum. I thought it was all done and dusted. I thought, great, fabulous. I can get on with the rest of my life. We then got betrayed again.
Because they didn't give you the Brexit that the people voted for.
They just didn't want to deliver it. They didn't want to deliver it. And so then we had to refight the battle again in 2019, which I did. I set up the Brexit Party. And within 6 weeks of founding it, I won the European elections. And the Conservative Party got less than 10% of the vote, their worst result in 200 years. And the very next morning, before the results were out, Theresa May resigned as Prime Minister. So I can say with some, sort of quite a boast, I suppose, that I have got rid of 2 British Prime Ministers. And now we've got Boris.
And the EU.
And now we've got Boris. And, at the moment, he's keeping all his promises. At the moment, the negotiating position is right. So that's good. I couldn't be happier with that. I mean,
so Nigel, help an American understand why Brexit matters to the man in the street. Why Brexit matters to a British shopkeeper. What's different in your life as a result of Brexit?
Well, first and foremost, if you believe in your nation, and if you believe in your flag, and if you believe in your identity, and you believe in your history, and you believe in what your grandparents' generation did for freedom and liberty, not just in your country, but in the rest of Europe too, then the desire to be independent, the desire to be free is something, Ted, you can't put a price on.
Sure.
You can't put a price on. Now, if I'm running a small business, and don't forget, Napoleon called us a nation of shopkeepers once. He thought, funny, isn't it?
Which I consider high praise.
Well, isn't it funny? 200 years ago, the French thought it was an insult to say the British were full of entrepreneurs. But if I'm running that business, all right, every rule and regulation that affects me, from employment law to health and safety at work to environmental law, whatever it may be, all of that law has been coming to me from the European Union. And there's no political party I can vote for at elections that'll change that.
There's no accountability that they could possibly have.
With Brexit, we can have proper fights, proper arguments, proper debates about how many people should come into our country, what we should do with environmental law. So actually, if I'm that shopkeeper...
You mean you actually have democracy now?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it remarkable? And to think that, Westminster, that amazing Palace of Westminster, that we, and called by so many, the mother of parliaments, had given all that away.
Well, and Nigel, look, this is a consistent pattern in Britain, in the US. Leftists hate democracy because when the people can choose, they don't choose what the leftists want.
Ever.
So they want an institution they can dominate, of faceless, soulless bureaucrats
Yes.
to govern and rule. This is about power and who has power.
But also about their sort of supposed moral authority, because they think they're better people than us.
Yes.
They genuinely think they're better people than us.
Right.
They
They
really
know better.
They know better how to run our lives than we, the peasants.
Well, this
And
is
that's what
why
it comes down to.
when Brexit happened, it was so interesting because Americans loved it. American conservatives were cheering you on. I mean, we were so excited. And I thought,
All right, tell us about your farewell speech.
Oh, yes. So I've done 2 farewell speeches, because the first was in 2016 after the referendum, and that was when I got up. I thought, well, maybe today they'll treat me with some respect. Oh no. Oh no. I got up and 500 people started booing and jeering, and that was when I thought, I'm just going to let them have a lot today. That's when I said, when I came here 18 years ago, I said to you, I would lead a campaign to take Britain out of the European Union. And you all laughed at me. Well, I said, you're not laughing now, are you? but the last speech, which we knew was the end, properly the end. And I thought, look, let's leave, let's go, sort of a little bit cheerfully. So we had our little Union Jacks, and we're saying goodbye. And the humorless, faceless, ghastly bureaucratic woman who was in the chair cut my microphone off.
So you're waving the British flag, and it's almost like you're holding a cross up to vampires.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're recoiling.
Yeah.
well, I want to know.
Because they hate the nation state. They want to abolish the nation state. So anyway, she cut the microphone off, which has never happened to me in 21 years there. And
We will not cut your microphone off.
Not here, not on the show.
Well, not yet. And she said, "Oh, you're leaving anyway. Take your flags and go." And you know something? That's what we did.
You did exactly
We took
that.
our flags and we left.
Senator, I want to know from your perspective as an American senator, what Brexit means for us, because I think we were cheering it on in many ways, because so many of the frustrations you're describing, we feel here in America.
Look, I think it is a powerful statement of sovereignty and of independence. It is shaking off the yokes of a tyrannical government that's not listening to the people.
Yeah.
And, I think back to when you had the referendum and Barack Obama came over there and lectured the British people. He condescended. And you know what? You talk about thinking you're someone's intellectual better. Barack Obama, just like the mandarins that run the EU, believed he was the moral and intellectual better. And I remember thinking, gosh, that can't be good for the forces that want to stay in the EU to have Obama condescending and hectoring the British voters.
It was the way, there was a big BBC interview, and it was the way he just looked down his nose at the country that has been your closest friend and ally for 100 years, with whom we've spent much blood and treasure, and been through some tough times and some good times together. It was shocking. It was shocking. We would go to the back of the line if we dared to leave the EU.
And see, I'll admit it, at the time, so I was rooting for Brexit, but I kept my mouth shut at it because it wasn't my responsibility. Right. What I said at the time is, you know what, this is a determination for the British people. Yeah. If they choose to leave the EU, that's a decision of national sovereignty. They have the right to make that choice. But who am I to tell them how they should decide this? This is a decision for the British people. And you know what? We wouldn't appreciate Boris Johnson coming over and telling us how to run our country. And so we should show you that same respect.
It was a big mistake. It was a huge miscalculation. Cameron thought it was the absolute ace card in the pack. In fact, the British people were revolted by Obama. And I think he sort of added about 1% to our score. So we're quite grateful. I mean, look.
Thanks, Obama.
Going on from here, I mean, look, we're the biggest investor in the USA. We're the biggest overseas investor in your country. You're the biggest overseas investor in our country. We share a language. All right, I know we sound a bit different, but we share a language.
Not everyone can have as refined an accent as we Americans have.
And we have an amazing shared history.
Although there is the complaint from my fair lady of why can't the British teach their children how to speak?
Yes. We have shared intelligence. You're the big guys, but without the two of us, NATO wouldn't even exist.
Yep.
All right. And going on, there's some real work to do on organizations like NATO. And So there's so many opportunities now between us. We should be buying Levi's jeans and Harley Davidsons without tariffs, and you should be buying Jaguar motor cars and Scottish whiskey without tariffs.
I could cheers to that. Absolutely,
it's not difficult.
You didn't bring any scotch with you, did you?
Today.
I do.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem, and you touched on it earlier. Despite my being joyous at where we are, and with Brexit, and I now want to go out around the rest of Europe. And spread the rebellion because I now want Europe to leave the EU, and that's my next.
By the way, who's next?
Well, that depends. That depends on the economics of it. It could be Italy or Greece the next time we have a serious economic downturn because they're in the wrong currency.
Right.
The euro is great for Germany.
Yeah,
it's great for Germany.
Not so great for Italy
because they've got a devalued currency effectively. So it's very good for them selling, motor cars into America and everything else.
Well, you were also sharing the frustrations of the Eastern European countries.
Well, I was, and this is interesting. The West of Europe, led culturally by the French, has become fanatical about multiculturalism and a whole series of very, very woke type issues. Listen, these Hungarians and these Poles are very traditional countries, very Christian countries, very proud of their identity. I mean, goodness me, these countries have suffered under communism, Nazism, millions of their people have been exterminated.
Soviet tanks are a real memory for an awful lot of those citizens.
Absolutely. And it's only 30 years ago that they broke free.
Yeah.
And suddenly you've got bureaucrats in Brussels telling them who can sit on their high court at what to do about gay marriage and many other issues. So you've got the economic north-south split, you've got the cultural east-west split. I don't know who's next. All I do know is that the phenomenal opportunities that we've got to bring back together the English-speaking peoples of the world. I mean, this is what Churchill used to talk about. And you know what? He was absolutely right then, and it's absolutely right now. But I do fear that Boris Johnson's decision to allow Huawei into helping to build our new 5G
Huawei
network.
is this Chinese technology company.
Yeah, it's a Chinese technology company. But here's the point. There's no such thing in China as a private company.
Right.
This is a communist state, a communist dictatorship. And so Boris's decision on Huawei at the minute has put things on hold. I mean, for example, there is no date in the diary for Boris Johnson to come and visit Trump at the White House. Now, this should have been happening very, very quickly. I even worry that with Huawei on the scene, whether Congress at the moment would even pass.
Because the issue...
and let me...
Could you explain the
issue,
issue, Senator?
Separate, but are they?
Yeah, so let me explain this a little bit. Huawei is this giant telecom company that is owned and controlled by the Chinese government. The Chinese government is investing billions in building a global surveillance network. And they come to countries all over the world and they offer incredibly cheap telecom equipment. And it's a little bit like the drug dealer that shows up at a junior high and says, psst, just try this. That's what Huawei is doing.
Wow.
And the reason they're doing it, they're not doing it to make money. They're doing it to install surveillance equipment. Britain, unfortunately, just announced that they're going to install Huawei equipment on some of their telecom infrastructure. One of the big problems with that, so there is this thing called Five Eyes. Now, what does Five Eyes mean? Five Eyes is an alliance of 5 countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And we share the most sensitive intelligence and security. So if we intercept communications between the Russians and the Chinese, we share that amongst ourselves. Now, here's the problem from U.S. national security perspective. If Huawei equipment is installed in the UK, we've got a serious problem sharing our intelligence with the UK. And listen, we are strong friends of the British. We will remain strong friends of the British. But if I hope the British government reverses its decisions on Huawei, and if they don't, I think we will have to reevaluate the Five Eyes relationship. And I'll tell you right now, 4 eyes are better than 6 eyes.
Right. You don't want that 6th eye.
That's
in
a
China.
great quote, and I'm going to take that home with me.
Good.
I'm going to make sure through British media and British conservative politicians understand and hear that message loud and clear. This is a mistake. It needs to be reversed.
We love and trust the British, but we're not interested in having our most sensitive intelligence intercepted by the Chinese and read by the Chinese Communist government.
You know, we have just about a minute left, and I'm sorry, we haven't even gotten to the most important issue. I know this is the one we've been on the edge of our seats about. we've talked about Brexit. We have to talk about Megxit. Meghan Markle breaking up your royal family.
Look, Harry, he's not had the easiest of lives. The mother dying and some tough things happening. He found his way in the world. He joined the army. He loved the army. He did 2 tours of Afghanistan. He held some very distinguished positions, Captain General of our Royal Marines and many other things. And then he married Meghan. I'm sorry, if you're born into wealth and privilege in the royal family, you're also born into duty.
Right.
And they told the Queen they wanted to keep the royal titles, go to the West Coast to LA and make money, not do any royal engagements. They wanted to, as we say in England, have their cake and eat it. And the Queen, at nearly 94 years old, has put her foot down and said,
God save the Queen.
And said, you no longer can call yourselves His and Her Royal Highness. You no longer, effectively, are members of the royal family. You are private citizens. Now get on an aeroplane and go off to the West Coast. Go off to Vancouver Island. Go off to LA, because we don't want you here anymore. Isn't the Queen truly wonderful?
She is so wonderful. She's
wonderful. Because we couldn't have our monarchy being devalued like this.
Right, and become so crass.
Let me ask you, on a personal level, how genuinely pissed do you think they are at each other?
Oh, listen, the Queen is old enough to have lived through our disastrous short reign of Edward VIII, who, of course, as we found out later, was a Nazi sympathizer and many other things. And the royal family got rid of him, banished him. He lived in Paris for the rest of his life. And I think she takes the view that Harry and Meghan, if they stayed in the United Kingdom, would do the royal family immense damage. And for anyone that's watched The Crown, in a couple of years' time, this will be the best episode ever.
Yeah. I do.
Well, I will say, though, seeing them pal around with Hollywood liberals, I apologize for the impact of our country on corrupting your royals.
This is the second American Revolution.
You know what? You're welcome to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that we've at least touched on the most important topic, I think we have got to let you go.
Thank you.
Nigel Farage, thank you so much for being here. Senator, thank you for having such illustrious friends and giving the vantage of a U.S. senator to the man who just broke the European Union. We'll have to cause a little bit more trouble on future episodes. That is our show. I'm Michael Knowles. This is Verdict with Ted Cruz.